Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Knitting Machines for Beginners. Today I'm going to go through 4 different methods of casting on. 2 methods are quick and dirty methods just for doing a quick cast on. You wouldn't use this for actual proper knitting. And then 2 of them are genuine cast on methods you can use for actually making things. All of them are going to be using fairly standard 4-ply acrylic yarn and a standard gauge knitting machine. We're also going to be using knitting machine weights like this. We're going to be using a ravel cord, which is a thin nylon cord like that. We're going to be using a latch tool for one of them, which is that, which is essentially a knitting machine needle that's just mounted in a handle. And we're also going to be using a cast-on comb of the sort which comes with some knitting machines like that. If you don't have one of these, don't worry, it doesn't matter. They're normally beige in colour, but this particular one happens to be silver. Okay, so the first method we're going to use is the open cast-on ravel cord method. And this one is very, very easy. It's very quick, but you wouldn't use it for anything that you wanted to keep the knitting for. It's just for tension swatches and so on. So you can see I've brought forward 20 needles or so just to show you. And I shall start off by putting the tension on the tension dial to about medium. In this case, this tension dial goes from 0 to 10, so I've set it to 5. And all I'm going to do is I've threaded up my carriage, I've wound the yarn around one of the clamps at the bottom right-hand side of the picture there. I'm just going to bring across the carriage from right to left, and you can see it's put a number of loops around the needles, but there's no actual knitting there yet, it's just zigzag. Okay, so I did this in the last video, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my ravel cord and I'm going to put it down between the sinkers, they're called, of the last needle, and then I'm going to bring it across to the first needle, and I'm going to put the ravel cord down like that. And it's important it's not caught in any of the needles, and I'm just going to hold both ends with one hand like so, and then I'm going to bring it across like that. Okay, so that's my row 2, and I'll do row 3 and then row 4, and once I've done 4 rows I can pull out the ravel cord. I'm then going to hang some weights on the knitting at the edges just to keep the stitches coming off the needles nicely. Okay, like so, and then I can carry on knitting. And if I knit a few rows, I can show you that the cast on is a very rough open edge. There are loops that can be pulled out like so. So this cast on is not going to last a long time. It's just there to give you something to start with. Okay, now let me take this knitting off, and then I will pause the video and set up for the next type of cast on. Right, the next type of cast on we're going to do is also an open edge cast on. So it also is not something you'd use for finished knitting, but it's a semi-automatic version of the same thing. This happens with most brother machines, although it will work with all other machines. Now you can see I've got my 1x1 needle pusher here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to push half of the needles back. So you can now see that I only have every other needle in working position. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread up my carriage, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did for the last cast on. Okay, I'm going to go carefully across, and you can see this time I've knitted on every other needle. Okay, this is the point where I bring in the cast on comb. Now the important thing about the cast on comb is you're looking for this little yarn clip here. There's one on each end, and you want this yarn clip to be facing you. Some cast on combs, that means the hooks on the cast on comb will be towards you. On some cast on combs it means you'll be away from you. It doesn't matter, it just affects which way round you put it. Now for this one I can actually take the spare yarn off the end, and I can hang the cast on comb by pushing it up, pushing the hooks up and through and round and over the hook, the knitting hooks. Can you see now it's hung on there? Okay, you need to be very careful to take this off and round the last one. and you can see that actually I'm going to hook it around this last hook here, and you can see now I can go, I just move the camera a bit, I can go to this yarn clip and clip in the yarn onto the yarn clip. That's why you want the yarn clip facing you. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my weights and I'm going to hang them actually on the cast on comb, not on the knitting itself, like so. And then the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my needle pusher once again, and I'm going to bring forward all of the needles that I wasn't using into the working position there. So now I've got all the needles forward and ready to go. And now what I'm going to do, if I had weaving brushes, which on this particular machine I don't, I would put them down, but it doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to knit across like so, and then I can carry on. Now, if you have a look at this knitting, you will see I've got these long loops at the bottom here, and that means that as and when I take this apart, the knitting is slightly less inclined to fall apart. It still will fall apart, but actually it'll hold together a lot better. Nevertheless, I still wouldn't use this for a finished edge. As you can see, it's very rough and ready. Right, the next two I'm going to look at are actually methods of casting on for a finished edge. Right, now this is a closed knitting cast on called the E-wrap method. Okay, and for this we're going to start with the yarn just loose, and you'll notice I'm starting with the needles 100% entirely forwards. Okay, now you need to be a bit careful how you set up your carriage for this. Try moving the carriage across, and as you can see, the way I've got it set at the minute, it doesn't do anything. So on this particular carriage, I have to press the P button, okay, on one side, and if I press the P button, then when I go across, it actually knits it back. Okay, that's the position I want it in. So I'm going to leave that P button set, and I am going to bring forward all of my needles like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an E shape around all of the needles. So I just start with this hanging loose, and I go around the needle and make an E shape like that. Okay, and I'm going to go up between the next two needles and make another E shape there. And can you see I'm doing them very, very loose as I possibly can. This is always a bit of a dodgy moment, the first row you knit, because however loose you try and get them, they always end up a little bit over tight and they don't like being pulled over the needles. However, you can see I'm going along making an E shape down all of the needles, like so, and this will produce a nice, firm, closed edge. So if you're making something like a scarf or a table mat or a shawl, then this will be a good cast on. It's got a nice elastic edge to it, so it's also good for things like collars for jumpers and things like that. Okay, so there we go. Now I've got that whole E-wrap done, and I'm going to take it across, and I'm going to thread up my carriage like so. So now I've got my carriage fully threaded and it's all ready to go. Now my first row is going to be my dodgiest row. So I'm just going to hang on to this, and in fact I'll wrap it around there just to keep it roughly in place. Okay, and this first row could be a bit challenging. So let's give it a go and see if we can get it to go. Now if you heard, it didn't really like that very much, but it did do it. Then, now have a look at this last stitch here. Hasn't fully come off, so I'm just going to pull the needle back and look, the stitch properly falls off it. And now I can hang my weights like so. And again, the first row after I do this, it may well complain at the weights a little bit. You hear that sort of, and look, there's that last stitch didn't quite go again. And then with a bit of luck from there on in, we are cooking with gas. Now this time, if I show you the cast on, you'll be able to see that it's a good neat edge cast on. It's nice and elastic, and this will not come apart we can now use this for some proper knitting. Okay, I've got one more to show you, so I'll just set up for that. Right, for this last cast on method, also a closed edge method called the latch tool cast on. And again, we want to make sure that our knitting machine carriage is set, not like this, so it doesn't knit them back, but with, in this case, the P button pushed down. Sometimes it's holding levers such that it does knit them back. Okay, now what we're going to do with this time is we're going to use the latch tool, okay, to create a whole bunch of latches that go around the needles. So we start again with a random length of yarn, and I'm going to put a little loop in it like so. Okay, and I'm going to put my latch tool through it, and I'm going to put it fairly tightish around the latch tool like that. Okay, now then, what I'm going to do is, starting on the left hand side, I'm going to put my latch tool up through the needles, catch the yarn in the latch tool and pull it down, which creates another loop. Put it up through the next needle, catch the yarn and pull it down. This is a bit like doing your own sort of latch tool rug. I'm just going to, or crochet, I'm just going to essentially crochet across the whole row. Now the problem with this cast on, it gives a really nice firm edge. This will be perfect for tablecloths, things like that. However, it is not remotely elastic, so that is a problem. So the length that it is the length that it is. It doesn't have any stretch in it at all. It's a good firm cast on. Again, you want to do it as loosely as you possibly can. However, having said that, I'm going to put the last one just on the needle like so. Okay, now again, the first row might be a little bit complainy. Again, I thread up the carriage. Okay, and again, with your first row, it's going to whinge a bit about going across. Let's try and see. There you go. Now, it really didn't like that one little bit, and that's because I did the loops really quite tight. And you can see it's a very, very tight cast on. Same deal applies. I'm going to hang my weights, and then we'll knit a few rows and see what it looks like. Okay, and again, it's going to complain when it goes across for the first time, like that, and then we're all good. By the way, I'm knitting fast because I know this machine and I know that it's in very decent condition. I wouldn't normally knit that fast. Okay, now let's have a look at this cast on. As you can see, it's very, very firm. It has no stretch in it, but it's a nice, apart from the fact I've used this yarn about 12 times, so it's very dirty now. It's a nice sort of chain link cast on. It looks nice and it holds its length quite nicely. So again, not too much blocking required with this. That is my 4 possible cast-ons. For the next video, we will look at methods of increasing the number of stitches that you're knitting. See you next time.